I'm logged in as the administrator, so I'll have access to every feature within the application. ClientCare360 is configurable to allow different users to have the appropriate level or levels of access to perform their job function. Some of the user groups include adult only, child only, adult and child, reporting user, read-only user, and administrator. ClientCare360 is HIPAA compliant. Let's open the adult screen and start with the screens used for admittance. To save you the pain of watching me type in data into the system, I've already entered some sample data into the system. We'll breeze through these first few screens to the core of the application, which is program placement, assessment, or assignment, grant funding and attendance, financial reporting and billing. First, we're going to look at my record. You can look up a client's record by either typing in the first name or their social security number. I typed in just a few letters of my last name, hit tab, and it pulled up my information. Some of the fields that we have in here are very basic: first name, last name, address, social security number, date of birth. By convention, the blue fields are required fields. This first screen is client info. The admission form is used to track when a client, used to track when a client starts or eventually terminates a particular facility. Medications form is where current and future medications are stored and tracked. The contacts form holds a client's contact information. These four forms, client info, admission, medication, and contacts, make up what we consider to be the first part of the admittance, and that is the admittance part of the application. Next, we'll move on to assessment. The assessment screens, which are sometimes called diagnostics, is comprised of two screens: medical and end dates. These screens are used to track a client's mental health records and medical conditions during the assessment. The medical form, medical and financial information, which is discovered usually after admittance and during assessment. There's a lot of fields here, so I'll let you take a moment to review them. Now we'll move on to end dates. The end dates form contains the dates and results of medical tests and tracks the end dates. There's a lot of fields here that are important to the client. I should point out that some of these fields within these forms will be different if we were looking at children. Those fields would not show up in the adults form. Some of these fields are only for children, and they'd be filtered out if the client was a child. The medical and end dates forms hold the data gathered during a client's assessment. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Up to this point, the client has, if you do, please email me at the end of the demonstration. Up to this point, the client has been admitted and has had an initial assessment completed and entered into the system. Based on this assessment, the client is then placed into the programs that meet their needs. So now we'll move on to program placement. To assign a client to one or more services first requires you to assign the client to a division and a program. Then use the lower section here to enter the date that they started that location, teacher, program manager, assigned, and then later outcome the end date when the client is no longer in that location. Service assignment is very important. The service assignment is where the client is assigned to the service that they're going to attend. I've already entered in for myself that I'm going to participate in the service of day habilitation facility starting at the first of the year and ending at the end of the year. There could be I may participate in that same service for the next year and following. Each entry should correlate with a grant, which we'll cover in a little bit. An assigned service start date and end date should correspond to their grant's end date, start and end dates, but more on that when we get into funding. The important point here to note is that a client can be assigned to a service even though they haven't received funding for that service yet, which often is the case if you have a new client that comes in. In the case where the client is transferring from another facility and their funding may transfer with them, the funding section could be filled out before assigning a client to a service, in which case the funding start date may actually not match the client's assignment start date. And we have some special fields to cover those circumstances. The next screen is inactive, and it's simply used to terminate a client. Let's move on to the grant funding. Now I've already entered in my funding information. The most important form in this application is the funding screen. A client's grant may come from one or four sources: comprehensive, SLS waiver, SLS state, EBD, elderly, blind, disabled, or unknown. Right now unknown's not being used. This might be a good point to mention that the convention throughout the system again is the blue fields are required, the white fields are not. So right now I'm assigned to a service, and we did my assignment over here in the program screen. I have funding. This screen is for funding, and I have been funded at tier 7. There's many tiers that I'm funded by, and we're going to put in that I'm funded for 1,000 units, and then we're going to click the Save Record button. Carryover units is an interesting field. What this field is for is when you have a client come over from transfer from another facility, they may have been granted 1,000 units, but they might have used 100 of those units already, therefore leaving only 900 units available. In that case, we would put 100 in here to show that the 100 units, the total, which it says down here at the bottom of the screen, is the total units minus the units consumed equals the carryover unit. So I'm wrong. It's actually what we would type in 900. These are the amount of units that will carry over into our system. But for now, we're going to type in 0 because in this circumstance I'm not coming from another facility. I'm starting fresh in this facility. Now we're going to move to the attendance screen.